I've never had the chance to go on a road trip. I've especially never gone on a road trip with a friend who has just stolen the Sword of Fate on a quest to seal the Machine Devil because a proper wielder hasn't become the quote-unquote chosen one just yet. I also don't live in a world with magic and a royal emperor and a somewhat fascistic government run by literal all-knowing angels, but like, the car part is at least applicable to me. But in September of 2021, the game studio Love Conquers All released Get in the Car Loser, a game very much about, well, all of that, allowing all of us to partake in this unique car adventure with cool friends. Now apparently the lead writer slash programmer slash designer, Christine Love, has made a name for herself, and when I first learned about Get in the Car Loser, everyone who mentioned Love only had great things to say of her other games. And while I had just learned of Love, the premise of Get in the Car Loser and the high praise of the rest of her games did short work on selling me on at least trying it out. Plus, it certainly helped the game is completely free, with DLC being only $10 extra. And the game itself is pretty much what I joked about at the top. You play as a collection of 3 early 20-somethings who are currently on summer break from Magic College or whatever. The main protagonist is Sam Anon, and she's who you mainly control throughout. Sam's been asked by her friend Grace Morningstar to go on a road trip with her and her partner, Valentine Vaillante. I don't know how to pronounce that. Valentine shows up in their car, Grace runs onto the scene fresh off of having stolen the ancient Sword of Fate, the weapon fated to strike down the Machine Devil once every 1,000 years, and they drive away fleeing from the oncoming angels wishing to get the sword back. Also, after the first chapter, they recruit an angel friend that fights with them named Angela. But that's not important yet. What is important is that everyone in the game is really super hot. Afterwards, the game is then split up into 3 distinct sections: fighting the Machine Devil minions and cultists, buying gas and other trinkets, and just driving, baby! And let's start out with the combat. Now, overall, this might be the weakest aspect of the game to me, but even then it did have some really neat stuff. Get in the Car Loser is an RPG that utilizes real-time combat mechanics. You control each of the 4 characters with 4 distinct buttons. Each character has a customizable moveset that they can perform on a timer. Sam is more of a support character. I usually used her as a healer, but she can also use buffs, debuffs, and slightly less efficient attacks too. Valentine is a tank, with their big move being Taunt to make all the enemies attack them. Grace is a solid attacker, but she gets to do the big flashy move towards the end, and Angela is also just a real good attacker. Now, how the combat is laid out was actually pretty confusing to me at first, but when I got the hang of it, I started liking it a bit more. Each combat encounter is separated into 3 rounds of moves. You can run through the first round of moves and then wait for them to cool down, or you can jump to the next round and immediately use those moves, again each with their own potentially different timers. You can do this up to 3 times, but at the end of the 3rd round there's a longer time where you have to wait to reset everything. A reset that is triggered by Grace using the Sword of Fate to deal a heavy blow to whichever enemy is currently targeted. And no matter how many times I used it, which was a lot, it always looked sick. As far as enemies go, most of them have a unique quirk to work around. Some heal their allies, one ties up one of the player characters until it gets hit. A particularly annoying one spawns in a new ally whenever it's low on health. The party as a whole always focuses all their attacks on a single enemy until it's either defeated or you toggle to another. One last main feature from the beginning is the stagger meter. Multiple attacks in quick succession raise this meter, with the Sword of Fate attack filling it up much more. The higher the stagger meter, the more damage the party can inflict upon the enemies, up to about 8 times the damage. And it's beneficial to get a high stagger meter, because then it'll be quicker to take out the baddie and less damage overall will be taken. Plus, some enemies will only take damage when they're staggered, so the strategy I fell into was finding the best enemy to defeat first, stagger it as quickly as possible, defeat it in short order, and move on to the next. At least that was my strategy until elemental types were introduced. So around the end of part 1, towards the beginning of part 2, I was grooving. I got a good rhythm attacking, balancing healing with damage, staggering enemies, and wiping them out. Then at one point I realized I was actually healing my opponents. And after analyzing the fairly busy UI for too long, I realized some of the higher level attacks have elemental types, as well as some of the enemies. Naturally, attacks of one element heal enemies with the same element. There's also a fairly rudimentary and never explained weakness hierarchy as more elements are introduced, and I did not like this one bit. Multiple times I found myself in a battle where only one character had attacks that had actually hit, which really only made the battles take longer. And it was a big bummer. So much of the game I really loved, but the battles were mostly just a way to get to the good stuff. And then the battles went from being a fun practice in timeout juggling to needing to have specific load balances and waiting for the attacks you can use to finally refresh only for the stagger to run out, and then your attacks barely do any damage and everything just winds up taking so long. Eventually, in the last hour of the game, I found a strat where I basically just juggled a specific enemy, keeping their stagger in check while continually attacking, but it took more than the full game for me to find it, and it still takes a while. But don't worry, that is it. That is my biggest complaint with the game. And luckily, the team did account for that. While the combat will always be a part of the game, there is a difficulty option to make the battles moot. And I definitely recommend toggling that if you, like me, want to get to the good stuff. Speaking of the good stuff, everything else in the game is pretty darn good. Next, I'll bring your attention to the in-between segments, the gas stations. After driving a while, you're gonna need gas. After battling for a while, you're gonna need to refresh your health. Thus, the gas stations. Each battle rewards some amount of money, and this money is spent first on gas, then on trinkets. Trinkets come in two flavors, move trinkets and support trinkets. Support trinkets are what you'd think, some heal party members, others either give buffs or debuffs. Move trinkets are used to fill up the party's arsenal of attacks and support moves. The trinkets have numerical ranks that describe how good they are, and equipping characters with higher level trinkets raises their personal ranks. Each trinket does something slightly different to each party member. For instance, one equipped to Sam allows her to heal, where the same equipped to Valentine allows them to taunt the enemy. These trinkets can then be upgraded by feeding them unneeded trinkets, putting them at their rank plus. For instance, 4 becomes 4+. And when a party member is fully equipped with 4+, then they'll be ranked 5. Now, all of this makes sense to me now, and I hope I explained it well enough to anyone going into the game new, but be warned, because my second fault with the game is the UI. It is bad. It is not clear pretty much ever what trinkets will give what type of attacks. It's even harder to see the elemental types from this menu. Swapping trinkets between party members is convoluted, and getting to the upgrade screen takes too many button presses. It honestly sucks. I spent so much time in these menus when I felt like it should have taken half as much. It is worth getting somewhat familiar with it though, 1, so you can play the game, and 2, when you're fully upgraded a type of trinket, one of the available screens gives really fun writing about the trinket that either tells a really cool story, fleshes out the lore of the world, or most of the time does both. It's just tough actually finding this really cool writing. There's one more thing during these gas station segments that kinda merge these and the combat, the Treasure Bureau. After Chapter 1, you can head in and pick up bonus missions. These missions, 100% of the time, are just extra combat encounters, but usually with a twist. Sometimes you gotta fight more of a guy, fight an extra hard guy, a guy who heals more often. The most annoying ones were just a whole bunch of guys, or 4 guys who can bind your whole party, so if you don't plan well, nobody can actually move anymore and you have to restart the battle or leave it. Yeah, they're not the most fun things to interact with, but after completing the bulk of them, the final rewards are the highest tier trinkets to help the final boss go quicker, I guess. And while you're grinding battles or delving through menus or just chilling in the car with your friends, one thing stays true throughout. The game looks beautiful and there is always a banger playing. I mean, stylistically, the art is just phenomenal. The backgrounds for each area while driving are all so vibrant and set each environment so well, with small touches that fly by in the background that really make the world feel alive. And the character portraits are all incredibly well done. Everyone is so expressive. I didn't like the top-down sprites as much, but they still got the job done well, plus these environments were just as good as the others. Isaac Robin and August Cartland did an amazing job with all the art in the game. Accompanying the art to truly solidify the world throughout is the absolute banger of a soundtrack. Krista Lee knocked everything out of the park with her amazing roadside beats. The driving themes match the environments perfectly, and despite spending so much time in each area, the music never got old. Speaking of never getting old, the battle theme is great. I listened to this track for hours and hours, and I still enjoy getting it stuck in my head from time to time. The shopping theme is equally good to listen to while you sort through another round of trinkets, but the Treasure Bureau theme only plays well in the Treasure Bureau, and it's a shame because it might be the best track in the game. Overall, the vibes are immaculate, and they set the stage perfectly for what is the main selling point, the narrative. As each of the 3 and then 4 main characters are driving down the road to get to the Machine God, you have to pay attention to 2 things. 1, there are enemies and stations along one of the 3 lanes you can drive on. You can move in between them all at will. Driving in front of an enemy sparks a battle, driving to a station lets you heal and fill up on gas and trinkets. But 2, as the characters drive down the road, they converse with one another, and these conversations are where the game shines. There are quite a few qualities that truly make the writing so good. The first one, and probably the biggest one, is just how wonderfully fleshed out each of these characters are. Whether or not they were pulled from Christine Love's lived experiences, from those of the people around her, or just general knowledge of how queer people have to exist in the world, these experiences shine through everyone in the game. Everyone in the car has had to deal with some crap in their past, but these experiences have shaped who they are now. Plus, it helps they're all super funny. I can't tell you how many times Sam was playfully bullied by her traveling companions, and yet it never got old. And every time Sam would get so flustered, there truly were so many good times on this road trip. Of course, many of these times were used to distract from the bad times that are also present. Again, every character comes with flawed characteristics and dark moments in their past, and at key moments during the game, many of these come out. Sam has incredibly low self-esteem and a bad case of gender dysphoria. Valentine has to deal with an abusive person from their past as well as being misgendered. Angela has to deal with the fact that she has turned against the organization she was once a part of, and Grace is dealing with the fact that she kinda stole a mythical artifact from the same organization without really planning too far ahead. And without getting into a detailed list of content warnings, I found each of these topics, as well as the various others the game delves into, were represented incredibly well. Yeah, they're bad. A lot of the situations are truly awful and abrasive and hard to read through at times. But they're all portrayed as awful, and each of the characters are able to properly de-stress and process these difficult situations. Oftentimes at a roadside diner with a good burger, a shake, and their friends. This leads into the second reason I really liked the writing: the actual narrative and the world building. Yeah, I love good interpersonal conflicts, and many of my most favorite games rely almost solely on those being good, but Get in the Car Loser also weaves such a fantastic web as it goes. As the characters drive along the road, their actual mission and their goals behind doing it begin to surface, because the world is kinda messed up. Historically, every 1,000 years the Machine Devil would be revived and bring death and carnage with him. Then when things couldn't be worse, a hero would be chosen. That hero would venture across the lands and vanquish the devil, restarting their 1,000-year slumber. But Grace Morningstar lives in the here and the now, and well before the scheduled prophecy, she recognized things are already getting bad. Machine cultists were running amok, harassing anyone they deemed other, and harassing is putting their deeds lightly. But despite the horrors being done in the name of the Machine Devil, the angels that rule the world refuse to acknowledge, touting their miscrewed sense of justice that the only time real action should be taken is when the fully appropriate time has come. So Grace does what any good God-fearing citizen would do, and she punches a few Nazis. Wait, no, that's our world. She stole the Sword of Fate and set off on a journey to stop the death and destruction before it could get any worse. And if I didn't make it clear enough, Get in the Car Loser is playing on a world that is a thinly veiled criticism of Western democracy, where the people in power sit in their high chairs, ignoring the people under them, ignoring the quick rise in fascism, simply telling everyone to wait and maintain the status quo. But instead of wallowing in this, Christine Love and the team leave us with a hopeful message. One where instead of fear, we should gather arms and rise against the oncoming fascism arm in arm, fighting it back before any more of us can get hurt. And these messages, paired with the atrocities of the cultists, and driven by our key characters, made for such a moving story. I really liked so much of Get in the Car Loser. The battles wore me down at the end, especially when I got a few crashes that made me replay the final boss 3 times, although there have been patches since, so this may be resolved for y'all. But everything else is exactly what I love to find in games. Be sure to read the content warnings before heading in, but do go in. Overall, I give Get in the Car Loser a 9 out of 10. Line is a character that shows up in exactly one scene, but she was like tailor-made to appeal to me. I mean, an overworked software developer with big glasses and a ponytail. No, I don't have a type, shut up. Thanks for watching. Go support Get in the Car Loser on both Steam and itch.io with the amazing soundtrack on Bandcamp. All links in the doobly-doo. And while you're down there, you can find the links to all my socials if you'd like to follow me elsewhere. If you are inclined to do so, please rate and sub. I post videos, you know, eventually. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. See you next time.